back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today with Steve once again. Back on the channel, definitely becoming a regular.
Yeah.
And we're back. You sound so excited. We are back because I wanted to do another update for our 12-week Book Tempters challenge. It's now been almost 8 weeks, so probably will be about 8 weeks when you guys see this video. And so in theory, we should have read 8 books. How many have we actually read, Steve?
I've read 7.
7 is good.
Yep.
I've read 10, very nearly 11. Although you're very nearly
I'm very
8.
close to finishing my 8, so I'm basically on track.
We're on track. I'm ahead, as always.
Yeah,
it's just me.
Always.
Just like being ahead.
Yeah.
So, we thought we'd just go through kind of what we've read since our last wrap-up. I'll link the last wrap-up and I'll link the TBR video down below if you guys haven't seen them. So you can go and watch our thoughts on the previous books, but let's just dive into what we've been reading. So
yeah,
I guess I should start.
You should start because you've got more.
Yeah, okay. So the first one that I actually ended up finishing of this second batch was this one. Ooh, very shiny.
Shiny.
The Good Immigrant USA, and this is a collection of non-fiction essays. This was for the prompt Face Reality, and I am definitely pleased I picked this one up. I actually bought it in London, I don't even know how long ago. The year it came out, but when was that? I don't know. A while ago, because I haven't been to London for a while, and I bought it on one of my Booktuber, hangout days where we go around London and buy all the books. And I bought it because I'd read the first one and absolutely loved the first one, which was just called The Good Immigrant. It was based around the UK and immigrants in the UK. This one is US, but essentially it's the exact same idea where they get loads of different authors, and not only authors, I think there's quite a few people who are fairly well-known actors, things like that, who contribute some piece of writing. And I definitely enjoyed this. I do think it's definitely going to be a collection that if you live in the US, it's well worth reading, especially if you are not an immigrant or a second or third generation immigrant, because it gives you an insight into what reality is like for people who are immigrating into the US. And yeah, I really find it is such a poignant collection of essays and just stories. So I really think it's worth reading. I personally connected more with the UK version because obviously I can relate to the UK stories a lot more. I know the places, I know the sorts of people that are being talked about, whereas the US is not quite the same for me, but I still think it's very relatable even if you're not necessarily from the US. So I recommend it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars as a whole collection, but obviously there were some stories that I liked more and some that I liked less, etc. Over to you.
Over to me. So the next book that I read was The Treat Yourself prompt, and this was A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This was the second in the Wayfarer series, and because I absolutely loved A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, it was the next best thing to pick up really for me, because I really enjoyed the first book and I really wanted to continue that sort of universe. It does sort of follow on from the first book in that you follow some of the characters still, so it was a really interesting story, absolutely loved it, and rated it 4.5 out of 5.
My second one then that I read was this massive book, My Chunky Boy. It was my Chunky Boy book. This was my Chunky Boy book. Obviously it's a massive book. It has, let's just remind ourselves because we've forgotten, it was such a long book. Actually, it's not as long as I remember. 640-ish pages. Basically. So this is a continuation of the Sun Surge Quartet. I won't go into too many details. I think I did a small wrap-up of this in my wrap-up, so I'll tell you a bit more there. But basically, it's good. It continues the story, but it does feel a little bit like a filler. It's a big epic fantasy. There's a lot of political scheming. There's a lot of sex in this one. Don't know if it was done that well, so I gave it 3 stars in the end. But I will finish the series because the last one is still on my TBR for this challenge.
The second book that I read was The Chunky Boy for me as well.
Chunky Boy!
Chunky Boy. And this was Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. And again, it was a series that I'd started and wanted to carry on with. And again, it was a brilliant continuation of the series and really got into the nitty-gritty of character details, and the story really evolved in this. So I would say that the first book was very much an introduction to the world and the characters, but this really evolves on that. So I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 as well.
I think
Absolutely
actually
brilliant.
this batch of books you've had really good ratings for these books. Like
Yeah,
you've
I've
enjoyed
really
all of them.
liked all of them, mainly because they've been really good. And also
Yeah.
they're some of your favourites too, so that also helps.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I think this one is where you start to see where Hob is going to go with her craft. Like, you
Yeah.
start seeing how much she can make you love characters and hate characters.
Yep, definitely that.
And she makes you really hate, like, she gives you a roaring passion
Oh yeah.
of hatred towards certain characters in her series.
Yeah, you feel a lot of like connection and emotion about particular characters, so I won't go into too much detail, I'll let you discover that for yourselves, but yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And are you going to continue on and read the entire Realm of the Oddlings series?
That's a bit much, but I might eventually.
We'll see.
Yeah. I'll at least finish this trilogy.
My next 3 books were actually Three's Company was the challenge, and so they were 3 books in the same series that you had to read kind of back to back, and that's exactly what I did. I read this whole little omnibus, The Braided Path by Chris Wooding. It's a collection of the 3 stories, The Weavers of Samir, The Skin of Lament, and The Ascendancy Veil, and I read all 3 of them pretty much back to back. I actually ended up reading them on my Kindle because, I mean, this is heavy to hold. This is
That's
about
another chunky boy.
800, no, 900, almost 1,000 pages, this one. So it's really big. But I did very much enjoy the series and the story, and I'm very glad that I read it. Chris Wooding has been an author that I've really enjoyed. I absolutely love The Ember Blade by him, which is a big epic fantasy, his most recent release. I also really enjoyed the Kessie J series, which is like airships and pirates and really fun. And this is the series I think he wrote before both of them. So you can definitely see it's the beginnings of his work here, where he's maybe not quite as established at telling the story as well as in other books by him. But with that being said, I still think it's a very interesting fantasy world. It's a world where there is magic, but the only people who are allowed magic are called weavers, and they are this kind of weird, corrupted race of people who have somehow started emerging in the last few hundred years and built themselves to prominence and become part of the noble houses. They wear these masks which allow them to manipulate the weave, which is kind of the weave of the world, the magic of the world. And once they have these masks on, they become really corrupt, like their body starts eroding. So it's a very sort of consuming magic, but they are allowed it because they are part of the Weavers Guild. And then there are other people in this world and other creatures in this world who have magic who are not allowed it. They are called aberrants, and they are hunted by the Weavers. The Weavers are constantly on the lookout for these. They encourage people, like normal people, to report anyone who has aberrant behaviour. And of course, our main character discovers very early on that her family's been murdered, she's left alive, and she has an aberrant power within her, which she does not know how to control or what it is or where it came from or anything like that. And this is a very political series. It deals a lot with different kingdoms, it deals a lot with different races in those kingdoms and who's going to be the one on the throne at the end of all of it. But it also deals a lot with power struggles between the weavers, the nobles, the normal people. There's lots of different groups who are kind of rebels trying to fight back. It's a big kind of all-encompassing, like, overall story, and I enjoyed it a lot, but I do think it has pacing issues here and there compared to his later books. But obviously that makes sense because you'd hope that he would get better as a writer. But I did really enjoy it in the end. I gave the first 2 4 stars, the third one I gave 3 stars, so overall, like, 3.5, 4 stars overall for the series, and I definitely would recommend it. I think if you're a fan of Chris Wooding, it's worth reading this one. Even if you're not and you just want some cool, kind of political heavy, weird magic systems, this could be a really good series. And I found it very easy to read back to back and back. So yeah, good overall. 3 books in one. Pretty happy that I've ticked off that challenge, as I was a little bit worried about it because I think this is the longest book that I had for this challenge. Over to you.
Well, it seems like we're copying each other in terms of which challenges we're tackling with this, because I'm also looking at my Three's Company, but I'm not finished all 3 yet.
Terrible behaviour.
So I finished 2 of them, and I'm working my way through the last one now, and it's His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I've finished Northern Lights and I've finished Subtle Knife, and I'm working my way through Amber Spyglass now. So just started it today and I'm already third of the way through, if not more. So I'm getting through it quite quickly, but really enjoying it. So the story follows Lyra in her quest to save Roger, who's her close friend throughout all of this, and she goes travelling across vast lands, meeting many different people and characters throughout the story. So, and from then on into the second book, we meet even more different characters, including Will, who's introduced in the second book. And as the story evolves, it gets a lot more in depth, a lot more is added to the story as we go on, and it really starts to get a bit meatier, which I really like. I particularly like the second book more than the first.
Yeah, I think the initial story is very much an adventure story for Lyra.
Yes.
It's a story of her kind of leaving the university where she grows up, the College of Jordan, I think it is.
Yeah.
And she goes on this adventure to rescue Roger from what they called the Takers.
The Gobblers.
The Gobblers, who have come into the town and started taking children, and she's very worried about what's happened to her friend Roger, so she kind of hitches a ride with someone to go and kind of find out what's happening. And it goes from there, and then she does, as you say, end up kind of traversing various landscapes, meeting witches and bears and all sorts of different types of people. I really like the gypsy kind of culture in this. I feel like that features very heavily.
It does. Egyptians.
They're called Egyptians. So kind of like gypsies and Egyptians all together, I suppose. But I really like their culture. I think they're actually featured really well. And the ideas of magic in this are very kind of twisty-turny. You don't quite know what's what for a lot of the story. Yeah,
it takes a long time to really start to go into detail as to what magic is and what's going on with it. So
yeah, and it's also got a very good kind of morally grey situation with a lot of the characters.
Yes.
You kind of know Lyra must be good because she's the main character, but you don't even really know where Will falls to start off with, and you're not really sure about like Lyra's associates that she meets along the way. So it's kind of a journey as you read to discover who's what and what they're all playing for, and also what is dust. Because that's kind of the main point of the whole thing.
That's my next task, really, is to finish up book 3 of this trilogy.
And what did you rate book 1 and 2?
So Northern Lights are rated 4. Subtle Knife I rated 4.5 because I enjoyed it more.
See what I mean? He's had some really good reads in this batch, which I'm
but they
impressed.
are good books, so...
Well, yeah. As you can see, we're doing pretty well. We're pretty pleased. Are you enjoying the challenge?
Yeah, I am.
He says that now, but off camera he's like, oh, you're making me do this TBR. It's so much pressure.
I feel more pressure when I've got a big list of books that I have to read. Like, if I just...
have to read them. It's just part of the challenge.
It does feel a little bit like it, but yes, true, it is a challenge. And I often like to just go, oh, what do I fancy reading? And just pick a book at random, just what I feel like, sort of, as and when.
It's an interesting task, because I think you've done like one TBR with me before, but that was much smaller than 12 books, so...
Yeah,
it's interesting to see how you're getting on.
Well, audiobooks do help that as well.
Audiobooks are always good. Yeah. And let's just chat quickly about what we're reading at the moment. So, what are you reading at the moment?
So, I've already mentioned one of the books I'm reading at the moment, which is Amber Spyglass. But I'm also reading currently, which is my Old Timer Challenge, which is this one. The cover's very shiny. It's not very contrasty. I don't know if you can see that, but it's This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. And this is a very political non-fiction, and it talks a lot about capitalism, climate change, oil companies, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a heavy read, and you've got to be in the right mindset to tackle it. So there's been times when I've read quite a bit of it, and there's been times when I've just not touched it for a week or two. So it's just being in the right headspace to be able to pick this up and plough through it, really. So, but I'm making good progress. I'm not far from being done with it. So it's on track for about a 3.5 because it's a very interesting book and it's got a lot of interesting points, but at the same time, for what I enjoy reading, it's just a bit too heavy and political. So I'm not sure whether it's absolutely my thing, but it's still very interesting as far as reading material goes.
It was a gift, so not from
also
me.
True.
I hasten to add, it was not from me. I don't think I'd choose something as heavy as this.
No, but it was something that was given to me, and it was something where I was like, okay, I will read it, and I will give it a fair go. So
yeah, I mean, it's probably an interesting read, but yeah. It's quite
If you like political, dense non-fiction, then
there's your book.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool, and the book that I'm currently very nearly finished with is this one, Broken Stars by Ken Liu. This was for the collector prompt, and this one is a collection of short stories. I've got 2 left to read, so not very many. Been enjoying it on the whole. There's been a couple that I haven't really enjoyed that much, and I think a lot of it is down to kind of the translation not quite being enough, if that makes sense, like the cultural difference being a bit of a barrier. And then the ones that I've loved have been great, and then there's been one that I DNF'd because it was really long and I just was not enjoying it. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag, but I think it'll end up around 3.5, 4 stars if the last 2 are good. And then I just have 1 book left to read. You still have quite a few, but of course we will do another check-in, which will be hopefully dominated by Steve's books this time.
Mostly, yeah.
Because I've only got those 2, like that one and one other.
I've got these 2 and I think it's 2 or 3 more.
Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, let us know if you've read any of the books or if you are planning to read any of them. We'd love to have your comments, and we will see you again in our next update video.
Yep.
Bye guys.
Bye. Close.
That was very close to my face.
Nice. If I'd have just slipped down my hand, that would have been comedy gold.
No.
So the next book I read was A Closed and Common Audit. Oh, there.
A closed and common audit.
I've been at work too much, clearly. So the second book that I did.
You did?
I did.
What did you do to
What
it?
did I do to it? I don't know.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I did actually.
Excellent
Well, I listened
news.
to it.
Excellent news.
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.